Hello and welcome to this video all about how to understand, calculate, and interpret residuals from a least squares regression line. We'll start off by going over the definition of a residual. I have it printed up right here at the top. So a residual is simply the difference between the observed response value and the predicted response value. In other words, how far off was our predicted value from what actually happened in real life? We use this formula here. Residual equals observed minus predicted, since we are just calculating a difference. Or in symbols, y minus y hat, where y is the observed response and y hat is the predicted response. I like to think about calculating residuals in 3 steps. Step 1, identify the observed x and y. That's just going to be given to you in the problem, or maybe you're going to find it from a scatter plot. Step 2, calculate the predicted y hat at x using the least squares regression line. And then step 3, find the difference y minus y hat. This step is where you're actually calculating the residual, but you need to do the other 2 steps first before you can actually calculate the residual. Let's go through a quick example problem. So we're given this data where we are analyzing students' GPA in high school versus their score on the ACT. We can predict a person's score on the ACT from their high school GPA using this equation here. That's the least squares regression line equation. So that equation is for this line there on the graph. So the problem is, what is the residual for a student with a 3.2 GPA who scored a 17 on the ACT? So step 1 is identifying our x and y. Here, the x variable or the explanatory variable is GPA, so that's going to be 3.2. And the y variable or the response variable is ACT score. So they got a 17 on the ACT. Next, we need to find y hat at x using the equation of our least squares regression line, which looks like this. Y hat equals negative 11.686 plus 9.744 times x. All we're going to do here is plug in our x coordinate, which is 3.2, for x in our least squares regression line equation, which turns out to be 19.49 once you plug all of that in your calculator. Finally, we're going to use what we got on these 2 problems to calculate the residual. So we have identified our y here, we're going to use that in the equation, and we've just calculated our y hat. So when we do y minus y hat, we do 17 minus 19.49, which when you put that in your calculator, you get negative 2.49, and that is our answer. That's the residual. What does that mean though? It means that the observed data point, or this here, was 2.49 points below the least squares regression line. Or in other words, the student scored 2.49 points less on the ACT than we predicted. And again, that's because we got a negative value of the residual here that we say less. We can also look at our scatter plot and see that their point is actually below the least squares regression line. So we get a negative residual and we say that the student scored less than predicted. So just to quickly wrap up, remember that the residual is the difference between the expected and the observed response value, where we do y minus y hat. And we have 3 steps. First, identify the observed x and y. Second, calculate the predicted y hat. And third, find their difference. Thanks for watching.